Hello everybody, time for part 4 of the 37 Studebaker chassis build. In this segment we're going to finish the front axle and we're going to work on the motor plate and differential. I'm looking forward to that. So what do you say we just get right to it? Let's see what's happened. Making progress. Got these threaded inserts welded in. These are still hot. Gotta be careful. And I got the steel rod welded in. I trimmed them a little bit, but I got to get the length just right. I have a plan of attack, which I'll show you here in a minute, on how I'm going to attach that end to the axle. I also have to move the chassis out here so I can weld on the tabs for the threaded rod end. Okay, with the help of my wife, we moved the chassis out here in the shop. Got it flipped over upside down so I can get to the radius rod connections. Should be able to get to this very easily and weld it off. I have to clean these up before I really get serious about welding this. And then here's what I decided to do. I made this little one for each side. It's 1/8 inch steel, heated it up with the torch and hammered it over a piece of scrap. So I'm going to weld it on both sides first. Then this will cap it at another level of strength, and that's kind of decorative, I think. Right now this is rough cut to length. I was going to cut it off flush with this piece. Maybe even cap the end. But I don't know, I might leave that hang out for effect. I have it on the other side too. It's one of those things you kind of have to make up your mind as you go. Alright, well, I could have this finished here in about a half hour. Just got to get these welds cleaned up first. Because once this is welded to it, whenever I remove the axle, the radius rod comes with it. You just have to unbolt it in the rear. Okay, moving on. Okay, another day. It's a Saturday morning. It's nice outside. So I thought I'd get to work on the cycle cart. Last night I welded these tabs in. And then this morning I did some grinding and I spun this on my belt disc machine. And then I used a DA sander with 80 grit. And I could take it down further with further grits in a file. I'll do that later. I tightened the bolts here, and now then I marked where I wanted this to be. It's going to be 1.5 inches in from this edge. Got it clamped on both sides, and I'm going to weld it under here and weld it under there, and then this little cap will finish it off. Okay, let's get this welded. So I finished welding it off on both sides. Then with the side grinder, I worked it down so the cap would fit. Yeah, it's going to look nice and clean. I drilled a hole in here so I could weld in there. And I'll weld it on the back side, but I think I'm going to not weld it here just so it looks clean. We'll see. This side turned out alright too. Yep. Okay, I gotta weld these on now, and then I can pretty much call it done for now. Well, it took a bit of effort, but I think I'm pretty much done with this front suspension. I can move on to something else. I finished my welding, got the caps on. I think that it'll be nice and strong and not look too bad from above. Okay. I left a couple of turns here so that this is adjustable, I guess you could say. I still have to tighten these nuts. Then I'm going to flip it over and see if I can see the action of this axle. Okay. I am pleased, very happy with the way this turned out. I think we can call this job done for now. Yep, nice and strong, simple. I may add a couple gussets here and there. I think the bracket for the steering rod will, in essence, be an additional gusset for this. That's my game plan. Okay, moving on. Okay, I clamped the chassis to the table so I could see how this works. It's stiff as you would expect, but you can see it's going to work. Alright. Nice. Okay. I thought I'd show you a few measurements, or tell you a few measurements, so if you're interested, write these down. Okay, the length of the chassis to the front here, 79 inches. The length to the front of the axle, 81 and a half. That's to this front of this rubber block, which is in essence the front of the axle. The width, which this section is square, 18 inches. This fits me, so adjust accordingly. So the opening that fits the motor plate, 24 front to back by 16. 24 by 16. Okay, the width of the chassis at the front, 12 inches. This is a 1 by 3. 1 by 3. This is 3/16 steel here. Okay, the axle width. The axle to the center of the kingpin, let's say, is 33. The axle from this surface here, which is the inside of the bracket, 31 1/8. This height right here, and this is hanging down a little bit, not much though, 8.5 inches. Okay. The point at which this starts to taper is at the 26 inches. You come in 26 inches and then it tapers to 12. Okay. The length of this radius rod from the back of the axle to the nut is 21 inches. Okay, that should keep you busy for a while. Okay, I'm turning my attention to this motor plate. This thing's made out of 10 gauge steel and it weighs 24 pounds. Which is good because I've learned you don't want any flex in this plate at all. This needs to be battleship quality. And this thing's built pretty good. And as light as it can possibly be, I think. I'm looking forward to installing this. I think I'm going to bolt it in place to start with. But first I have to cut the recesses in the chassis for the differential to drop in. Okay, let's get to that. Okay, here's the motor plate. It drops in. And these holes line up with the chassis. So I'm going to take some long bolts, just a handful, and temporarily install it. I still have to notch the chassis here. I made a mark where I have to drill a hole and notch it. Then I can drop in the differential. I'll drop down to the center here. I have my motor, my Honda motor, and I have the Comet torque converter. So I can mock this thing up quite a ways. I have 2 bearings. I need 4. I only have 2 with me right now. So I can mock it up with those 2, and when the other 2 come in, I can put those in. So that's really what I want to do, is get this thing on its wheels. So let's plug away at this and see what we can do. Okay. Now I'm set up here to do the notching and drilling of the chassis. This is 1 3/4. Could be a little smaller, but that's the one I had. And then I have a jigsaw here with a metal cutting blade. I was going to use my Sawzall, but it's down at the shop. But this has actually worked okay. There's my first side. Drilled the hole, then cut into it. So now I got to flip it over and do the other side, and then I could put the motor plate in. This is going to be the coolest setup when it's done. I like the idea of this whole axle being able to be removed from the top. Yeah, that is going to be so sweet. Okay, so I think at this point I'm going to tack weld this thing on. I decided I'm going to weld it. And then I was looking at the underside. I need to do some structural welding under there so that it's solid to this chassis. And I think I'll put some pieces in here so that this won't flex. Anyway, that's next. Looking good so far. Before I put this motor plate in the chassis, I thought I'd mess with the differential and the bearings. I have my engine and my torque converter. So the beauty of this is I could set it up outside of the chassis, get it all the way I want it, then drop it in and weld it in place. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can do it here on top of the counter. Okay, let's see what we come up with. Well, being that this is a prototype, already there's a small little glitch. So this bearing fits on the outside here, and this bearing fits under here, but I have to cut this out so that the bearing can be, the bolts can be removed, and then the bearing can be lifted out with the whole assembly. Well, that shouldn't be too tough. Cutting through here and through here on both sides. Okay, if I can get that accomplished, then I can actually install the differential and see how that looks. I'm using my plasma torch to cut out these little pieces. Got a little guide set up. It's working out pretty good. Now we're back on track. So these will go in here. And the notches turned out okay, so I can drop that in now. Okay, let's get this thing bolted up. Okay, this is kind of cool looking. I just have these loosely. They're not even tight really. But this spins like butter. And I have the engine sitting here on the adjustable plate. No nuts and bolts yet. I don't have the belt on this yet. I just put it on there to check the alignment. Okay, so for that sprocket to align with the diff, there's a spacer block, which I don't have yet, goes right here. They make this so that it'll make everything line up. So I need to get the spacer, the sprocket, the disc. These are all things they have over at the shop there that are designed to fit within the confines of this opening here. So anyway, all right, cool. So now I've loosely bolted the engine to the plate, to the sliding plate and the plate, and I used 3/8 inch hardware, so I had to open up, you know, the bosses here in the aluminum. It was easy. Then I can use a 3/8 bolt. And here's the adjuster once I get around to needing it. I'm pretty sure on the Cartco cars, they weld a piece of steel between these two nuts so that you just have to loosen the bolts from the bottom. You don't need 2 wrenches, which is so I might end up doing that, tacking in some steel there. We'll see. So this is a pretty cool little installation. I'm looking forward to getting the sprocket and disc. Okay. This morning I loaded this whole menagerie into my car, and I took it over to Ron's place and showed it to Ron and to Dan. He's the CAD guy. Matter of fact, here's the original drawing that Dan did. So I showed him how I had to notch it here so this bearing would come out through the top. I also found out I received these pieces and didn't know what they were for. Well, they're to re-strengthen this gap here, which is kind of cool. I was able to pick up the sprocket and the disc and a caliper. So let's talk about this caliper. So this is the caliper bracket right here, which I already had, but I didn't know how it installed. Here you can see it right here. So it comes up from underneath, right down in here. You can see, and there's some threaded inserts there, and right in there. So this comes from underneath, and then the, I'm one-handed here, so hang on. So then for this to work properly, it has to install right here. I already sort of mocked it up, and that's where the disc lines up with these bolts right here. But this needs to be cut out a little bit. If I flip this over here, maybe you can see it. It hits right here. So I need to notch that out, because we're prototyping here, trying to get this figured out. So anyway, that's going to be cool. That's going to be ahead of the axle. And of course here's the hose. Now I also learned a little bit more, a couple things I didn't know. For instance, this disc, the hole pattern is the same as the hole pattern here, so I shouldn't have any trouble bolting that up. But the sprockets are a different pattern than right here. So Cartco came up with this spacer. It's actually a spacer and an adapter. So here's the bolt pattern for here. So that goes on like this. And then there's your bolt pattern for the sprocket. So that screws into these. Pretty trick. And I kind of loosely mocked it up, and sure enough it lines up with this sprocket in here. So I'm pretty jazzed, as you can expect. So I can actually get a little bit further along on this. Alright, moving on. Okay, I'm going to try to put this differential together with the sprocket and the disc. It turns out that there's longer bolts required to be able to capture everything. So these come out, these go in, and then these are used to attach this to here. And I still got to round up the bolts for the sprocket, but anyway, I have a 52 or 54 tooth and then a 60 tooth. So I thought I'd talk about sprockets, chain sizes for a minute here. So let me set that up. Okay, here's a quick tutorial on chain size and sprocket sizes. Now this is not the definitive word by any means. This is from practical knowledge of 3 to 4 years of driving cycle carts around. So you have two chain size choices, 35, which is a smaller chain, and a 40. And a lot of guys go with the 40 because it's heavier duty and they think it's stronger, which it is. But the 35 chain is what they use on racing carts, and I use that on my monocar and on the BMW, and I've had no chain problems, certainly not weak. The old 27 is a 40 chain, so that's large. Okay, now on the sprocket sizes, the torque converter, you could have an 8, 10, or 12, and there's other choices, but when you buy the torque converter already set up, you either buy it with a 10 tooth or it comes with a 12 tooth. And if you buy it with a 10, it's for the large chain. You buy it 12, it's for the small. And I'll show you what I use. On the axle, you could put a 54 tooth, a 60, or a 72. So if you want any ratio other than what they sell, you can change the small sprocket, which is what I'm actually going to do. I'll show you here in a minute. They sell them for about 15 bucks, and you could change the small sprocket to play with the ratio. Okay, so here's some basic ratios with the small 10 tooth and a large sprocket. So if you have a 10 tooth with a 72 tooth sprocket, you got a 7.2 to 1 ratio. That means the small sprocket turns 7.2 times around to 1 revolution of the 72. So if you have a 10 tooth with a 60, you got a 6 to 1. If you have a 10 tooth with a 54, you have a 5.4 to 1. So the little sprocket turns 5.4 turns per 1 turn of the large. Now on my cars, because I bought the setup all ready to go, on old 27 I have a 12-72. So that gives me a 6 to 1 ratio on that car. Now that's a heavy car, it's 340 pounds, it maxes out at 40 miles an hour. If it was lighter, it'd go a little quicker. But it's quick off the line because it's geared low to jump off the line but be limited in speed. Now on the monocar, I have a 12 tooth with a 60. So I have a 5 to 1. So 5 turns to the small to 1 turn here, and I get 47 to 48 miles an hour out of that car because it's 258 pounds. That's the other reason. You try to build as close to 250 as you can. That way you'll get good performance. But what I'm going to do on the Studebaker is I'm going to experiment with what am I going to do? I'm going to do a 12 tooth. I bought one of these today. It's $15. It's coming. I'm going to use the large chain, the 40 chain, and then I'm going to put on the 54 tooth, so a 5.4 to 1. So this will give me more top speed and less off the line, you know. So the old 27 will jump off the line quicker than the monocar and the Studebaker, but give me a little bit of room to run and it'll blow right by them. So when you're racing in a pack, like at the Grand Prix, and you're passing cars and you're on a straightaway, this 4.5 and 5 to 1, it gives the car more legs. You know, just a little bit more top end before you get to the corner. And if you watching the videos, I just drive by a lot of these guys. They might be out and ahead in the beginning, but if I keep the pedal to the metal, I'll catch up and go by. So plus I got my butt whooped by Johnny Dumpers in the Peugeot, so he's got a little more top end than I do, and he's got a jack shaft with different sprockets and then a little porting to the engine and a different carburetor. He's several years ahead of me in the development curve. So I'm playing with gearing. Now it's important to note that in all of these gearings, with a 250 to 300 pound car, the motor will not reach 3,600 RPM. It just won't. Which is fine because we limit the speed to around 45 to 50 miles an hour. Believe me, that's plenty fast enough for these chassis. So you don't really need to take off the governor because you never get into the governor range, truthfully, which is 3650, I think. I'm guessing the monocar at full speed, 48 miles an hour, I'm probably spinning 3,000 RPM. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. Okay, so you'll have to stop the video and you have to listen to my rambling several times to completely grab onto this. But this is the basic setups. You could do any one of these. Do you want your car quick off the line or do you want more top end? So I kind of go this way because I try to build a super light car. And I got my butt whipped in the drag races because of it. But of course I was second place in the Gordon Bennett because of this gearing. So it's just a matter of choice between the builder. So hopefully that helps you understand sprockets. Okay, moving on. Since I've never had one of these apart and I've never put one of these setups together, I really only have this photograph to guide me. So based on this, it looks like the spacer is next to the label. So, and that seems correct because this bolt threads in, there's a threaded boss in here for these 4 bolts, and that makes sense now that I've thought about it. But it's a little bit tricky because I come to find out as I started pulling these bolts out, and they were in there stout too, I had to use the impact driver to bust them loose. As I got near the end of the thread, this started to push apart. And of course I didn't want that, so I put locking collars here to keep it together. Then I could take out the 4 bolts and basically thread on the disc, the spacer, and the sprocket all at once and capture it with these longer bolts. That'll put the disc on and the spacer. So the long bolts hold this disc and the spacer, and then these bolts, 3/8 bolts, they thread in here. Trust me, they do. I'm one-handed here. And then the nut on these long bolts is inside here. So it's a pretty trick little setup. I have the long bolts installed now. You can see the nuts in there. And it's a pretty nice installation. Feels good. These locking collars were a bust, so it still wanted to come apart, and it was a bit of a challenge holding it all together while I got a couple of bolts in it. But it's now ready for the sprocket. I'm going to put on the 54 tooth, and then these are the 3/8 bolts that hold it on, and they go into these right here. I think I have a chain around here, a leftover length of number 40 chain, so I could mock this up. I'm going to put the bearings on the shaft, get it into the chassis there, and see how it looks. That's my goal here. Okay. I have to hand it to the guys over there at VKC. They came up with a sweet little package here. This is a derivative of what they're doing in their current cars now. So it's this is geared towards a nice, simple, straightforward chassis that you and I can build in our garages. So without too much effort, I was able to slip the bearings on, drop it down in, and loosely bolt it up. Spins real nice. I'm looking forward to driving this. I just dropped it in there without really eyeballing it up, and I'll be darned if the sprocket doesn't line up. That's cool. Here's the bracket for the caliper here. I need to modify it still a little bit, but what's neat is it has a little bit of adjustment built into it, so that's a cool feature. Okay, so in this mock-up, I'm mocking up the 54 sprocket. I bought a new 12 tooth, and then I'm using the 41 chain. Okay, let's see. I think I'm going to modify this so I can check the fit of the caliper. Okay, let's do that. I'm set up here to take a little bit of metal off this bracket so I can get that caliper to slip in there all right. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, I pretty much have this bracket done, so I'm going to call this the end of the 4th video. I'm past the 30-minute mark. So we'll install this bracket in the next segment and get some more work done on that chassis. I really think I can get it on the wheels this time. Okay, and as always, thanks for watching.